Uh, 12 chapters. This is what I've written down. Before the birth of her twin sons, God told Rebekah, Isaac's wife. Isaac was Abraham's son. He told her that the older twin would serve the younger. Jacob emerged from the womb with a firm hold on the heel of his firstborn brother, Esau. In fact, Jacob means heel, while Esau means hairy. From the beginning, Esau was the favourite of Isaac, his father, and Jacob the favourite of his mother Rebekah. When Esau came home hungry from hunting, he surrendered his birthright, the birthright that Abraham had passed to Isaac. That was the right to inherit the covenant of God made with Abraham. And he just surrendered it for just a bowl of food. Later, Isaac, blind and old, and sensing the approach of death, asked Esau to find him his favourite meal of game as a prelude to giving Esau his blessing. Rebekah overhears and schemes with Jacob to steal Esau's blessing. They even use the fleece of the kids they cook to fool Isaac by putting the goat hair on Jacob's hands and neck, because Esau really was hairy. Esau was not best pleased and vowed to kill Jacob when when Isaac died. Rebekah and Jacob thought it best that Jacob went to stay with Rebekah's brother, Laban. So he leaves, heading for Haran, where his uncle lives. On the way there, he stopped for a rest and had a dream of a stairway reaching up to the skies with angels going up and down it. Then God told him of his covenant promise, and Jacob committed himself to serve the Lord. He named the place Bethel, which means God's house, and set up a stone as a memorial. The sense of destiny this gives him doesn't seem to change him much morally. Continuing his journey to Haran, where his uncle lives, he meets his cousin Rachel at a well where she is watering the sheep, and he is smitten. However, he meets his match with his uncle Laban, who says he is required to work for 7 years to win her hand. At the last minute, Laban substitutes his oldest daughter, Leah, instead, and then tells Jacob he must work another 7 years for Rachel's hand. He does that and works another 6 years for Laban to get sheep and goats. He makes a bargain that he will only take sheep and goats that are born with one characteristic. And he then asks God to help him, and the sheep and goats produce a lot of kids and lambs with the characteristic that it pays wages. Not surprisingly, Laban cools off towards Jacob as he becomes more and more successful. So Jacob decides to set off for the land of his ancestors while Laban is temporarily absent. It's a mark of his new status that Laban, after chasing, agrees a pact that respects Jacob's territory. However, Jacob is still concerned about Esau's anger, so sends ahead of the family group a messenger, followed by messengers with rich gifts. It's a mark of his wealth that he sends herds of goats, sheep, camels, cattle, and donkeys, totaling over 550 animals. However, the day before they were finally go to meet, Jacob was stopped in his tracks by the mystery of God. He spent the last evening by himself and wrestled with a man until daybreak. The man couldn't get the better of Jacob, so deliberately threw Jacob's hip out of joint, and then urged Jacob to let him go. Jacob wouldn't let him go until the man had blessed him. The man said, "You are no longer called Jacob. From now on, your name is Israel," which means God wrestler. You've wrestled with God and you've come through. He goes on to meet his brother, but he was no longer his old self. He'd been a victim himself and approached his brother sensitively. Esau was pleased to see Jacob and tried to refuse all the gifts that Jacob had sent. But Jacob insisted, and the pair parted amicably and went their separate ways. Jacob insisted his household, which consisted of 2 wives, 11 sons, 1 daughter, many servants and herders, should get rid of any foreign gods which they had, and they did. And the terror of God meant that no one pursued them or stopped them as they travelled. And you can read more in Genesis chapters 25 to 36. And there is a lot more, let me tell you. When I was putting this précis together, I used several sources. One of them was a daily devotional commentary by a guy called Lawrence O. Richards, which I used when I was going through the Bible about the 3rd time. At the end of the chapter, of one of the chapters, referring to Jacob's meeting Esau, he says, "If we consider the feelings of others, we will make wiser as well as more godly choices."
And our first reading is from Genesis, chapter 28, verse 10 to 20. Jacob left Beersheba and set off for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw the stairway resting from earth with its top reaching heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Then above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land in which you are lying. Your descendants will be like dust on the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the people on earth will be blessed by you and your offsprings. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you are, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is no other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early next morning, Jacob took a stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I may safely return to the Father's house. Then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all of that you give me, I will give 10%. Thank you.
There's no doubt that Jacob's life is a tangled web. But as his story unfolds, we are discovering that God is definitely with him and for him. Because of his actions concerning his brother Esau, Jacob has fled from his home. He stops to rest on his way to his uncle's house. And as he lays to rest, he has a dream in which God speaks to him. Not as you might expect, offering words of rebuke, but instead offering him promises and blessings. He will have numerous descendants. He will possess this land. He will be the means of blessing all the peoples on earth. Predominantly, he will know divine favour. God said to him, I am with you. I will keep you and I will bring you back. Confirmation that although Jacob has tricked his way to significance, he is the descendant through whom the calling and blessing of Abraham will continue. For the very first time, Jacob responds with fear and humility. He acknowledges God's presence by naming the place Bethel, house of God. And he makes a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I can return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So do things go smoothly for Jacob from here? Despite God's promises to him, Jacob's immediate future does encounter difficulties. On arriving in Paddan Aram, he is deceived into marrying Leah, before working an additional 7 years to marry Rachel, whom he loves. Tensions continue as Leah becomes a mother many times, but Rachel is unable to have children, resulting in another rivalry, this time between Jacob's wives. Finally, Rachel gives birth to Joseph and Benjamin, and throughout this time, Jacob's prosperity brings its own problems. Having fled to Laban to escape Esau's grudge, he must now leave because jealousy has changed Laban's attitudes towards him. This time, it is the Lord who directs Jacob's path. And despite Jacob's actions, God's promise to be with him will continue. God stays faithful to him. And that faithful God is our God. And as we journey on in life, as with Jacob, he will be with us, always staying faithful to us.
This time it's Genesis 32, verses 22 to 31. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he'd sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with man and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask me my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." And the sun rose up above him, and he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Amen.
Hello and welcome to today's Sports Roundup. My guest today is Jacob, just back from his well-publicised and some have suggested ill-advised wrestling match with God. Jacob, welcome to the studio. Now, just to make this clear, you wrestled with God.
That's right.
Didn't you think that was a bit unwise?
No, why should it be?
Well, I'm sorry to put this bluntly, but you're an ordinary and actually quite skinny man.
I prefer to use the term svelte.
Whatever the muscles aren't exactly rippling through your clothes. Yet you decided to wrestle with the omnipotent creator of the universe. You didn't feel a little bit out of your depth?
I guess I just like to aim high.
But you're not even a professional wrestler,
Well,
are you?
No, technically I'm not, but in a way I feel like I've been wrestling all my life. The story goes, I virtually came out of the womb wrestling with my older brother, and I've spent my whole life struggling to overcome everything. My birthright, my circumstances. In a sense, I have never stopped wrestling with God.
But actually wrestling with God, that's taking it a bit far, isn't it?
Not at all. It was a relief to get it all out into the open.
And if you don't mind me asking this question, as the judges have been a bit vague on this one, who actually won?
I'm not sure it was so much about winning, but for what it's worth, God told me that I had overcome him.
How? I mean, sorry, but how? You're just an ordinary skinny...
Yes. I've heard that bit already.
But how did you overcome God?
I think it wasn't so much to do with brute force as it was about persistence. By the end, I wasn't wrestling. I was just clinging on to him. I knew that I couldn't beat him, but I wasn't going to let go, as if I knew that even while I was struggling with God, I couldn't do without him.
The reports are saying that you were injured during the fight as well.
Yeah, that's because when God realised that I wasn't going to let go, he touched my tendon and caused my hip to be wrenched from its socket.
You mean he cheated?
Oh, no, I don't think God cheats. It's God who makes up the rules.
Wow. You must feel pleased to have beaten a genuine deity in a wrestling match.
Frankly, I'm lucky to be alive.
Certainly it would be a braver man than me who takes him on for a rematch.
Do you think you're not at all inclined to wrestle with God? Are you quite happy with the way your life is going?
Happy? I didn't want to do sports interviews. I wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter. But the opportunities just haven't turned up. I've never had the time because I've been looking after my mother all these years. And it's not as if she hasn't got other children who could help a bit, if they would have only bother. And maybe if Helen had said yes when I asked her to marry me.
Here, you might need this.
You're not at all inclined to wrestle with God. Are you quite happy with the way your life is going? Good question, isn't it? So back to Jacob. Jacob had taken his father's blessing intended for Esau, his older brother, and then he had to flee. Jacob had gone off and married the daughters of his uncle, but then had fallen out with him. The passage that we just heard is set on the eve of the reconciliation with Esau. It is in the context of preparing to face Esau that Jacob's second encounter with God occurs. The account of his wrestling match is intentionally mysterious in its details, but what became clear is for Jacob, this was a moment of struggle where he recognises that he needs help. His self-sufficiency finally runs out. He wrestled all night. He was persistent. He grabbed onto God and he wouldn't let go until he had received a blessing. He realised his dependence on the God who would continue to bless him. It was here that his relationship with God became essential to his life. That is why he was given a new name, Israel. This new name, making him someone new, someone changed, a new name for a new stage of his life. The story is about Jacob's amazing meeting with God and how being in the presence of God brings about a change. In the drama, Jacob said, I think it wasn't so much to do with brute force as it was about persistence. By the end, I wasn't wrestling. I was just clinging to him. I knew that I couldn't beat him, but I wasn't going to let go, as if I knew that even while I was struggling with God, I couldn't do without him. Jacob was never a perfect hero. Instead, he was just like us, trying to please God, but often falling short. And although his methods weren't always respectable, his skill, determination and patience have to be admired. From the beginning of the story, God promised that his plan would be worked out through Jacob, not his twin brother Esau. And as for Jacob's life, well, we may want to question some aspects of it. It's certainly a complicated life, a complicated story. This is a story of God at work in someone's life. And there is a mystery to God that often means we don't know why things happen as they do. As for the wrestling in Jacob's life, particularly his wrestling with God. To me, that is an illustration of Jacob's faith journey. And it's the same for us, isn't it? In my experience, a faith journey will always have times of peace and times of struggle. Times when all is well with our relationship with God, and times when we find it hard. We wrestle. It wasn't an easy journey for Jacob. And it's not an easy journey for Christians today. It's a challenging journey of struggles and blessings. And yet we need the challenges to stop our faith becoming static. Jacob's journey of struggle with God caused him to change. That had to happen. And perhaps fighting against the change that God requires of us is the main course of our wrestling. We want to know God. We want to be his children. But we want our lives to stay exactly as they are. We don't want to change. Jacob was challenged to question whether his relationship with God was essential to his life. And that is our challenge too. Because the struggle to be the people that God wants us to be will always be there. If God is essential to us, essential to our lives, essential in everything we do, then his challenge, his wrestling, is inevitable. There's a hymn that says, "Fight the good fight with all thy might. Christ is thy strength, and Christ thy right. Lay hold on life, and it shall be thy joy and crown eternally." The story of Jacob is a story of struggles and blessings. And perhaps one of the greatest blessings is when God said to him, "I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." In the final words of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says this to us, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." If our faith causes us to struggle, we will never be asked to struggle alone. If our faith causes us to wrestle, he will be with us in our wrestling, helping us to find his blessing of peace. A peace that is only found in his love. Amen. God became known to Jacob in quite a dramatic way, and he wants to be made known to us all. And for that to happen, we have to allow ourselves to meet him and be open to him. We have to have a personal relationship with him. And then, like Jacob, we will receive his blessings.